Hey guys, Jessica here, and today I'm sharing a card I made using the Brutus Monroe Jars of Love stamp set. Okay, so let's get started with this card. Today we are using the Brutus Monroe Jars of Love stamp set. I think these jars are so cute, and I love these beautiful sentiments down here at the bottom. I'm planning on doing a scene with these, so we're going to be doing some masking so we can build a scene. And I'm using the Brutus Monroe masking paper, and I'm going to be cutting the masks out on my brother's Scan and Cut because I hate cutting things out by hand, and anytime I can use my Scan and Cut, I do. So we'll start by stamping these stamps onto some masking paper. I'll put these in my Misty here. And I'm not sure exactly which jars I want to use. So I think I'm just going to pick a few and stick them on here. Okay, we'll start with those. I'm using the Raven Detail ink. Now, since these are masks, we don't have to have a super great impression, but I want to make sure that the outlines are nice and solid because that's the part that I need the Scan and Cut to recognize best, so we get them cut right. Okay, so that looks good. I'll put that one aside. And we'll get these stamps cleaned up, and then I want to stamp a few more of these jars just so I have a bunch to choose from when we go to make our scene. Okay, so you can hear my dogs down there barking, but we're going to go ahead and put this through the Scan and Cut now, and I'm going to use the setting to have it cut right on the outline, because you can have it cut right on the outline, or you can make a border, or you can even actually go in from the outline, but we're going to cut right on the outline for our masks. So I'm going to use my mini Misty for this. So I'm going to put that in down there at the bottom. And when we are making a scene and doing masking, you always want to remember that whatever you stamp first is going to be in the front of your scene. So whatever jar we want to be kind of sitting more out front is what we will stamp first. And I think I want one of the smaller ones to kind of be out front. So I'm going to use this one that has the cute little spoon and the tag on it. I'm going to put this almost in the center, but a little bit off to the left. And kind of down near the bottom. Okay. Go ahead and stamp this up with the Raven, or ink this up with the Raven Detail ink. That's a really nice impression. We don't need to stamp that one again. And then we need to use this mask, and we'll put this over our stamped image. And then whatever we stamp on top of that will look like it's behind it. And when I make masks like this, I do usually save them and reuse them until they're kind of all used up and can't be reused. So after we're done with this, I will just take this mask and put it on the back of my stamp set, and then we'll be able to reuse it later. So now we have that masked, and I think the next jar I want is that really tall one. So I'm going to put this next to it. And then we can also stamp one on the other side. And I think I want to use this one. No, maybe a smaller one. I think we'll do that. Okay, so then we'll ink these up. Looks like we have pretty good images there. So then we're going to stamp some over to this side, so we also need to put a mask over this tall jar. So I will grab the tall jar mask. I want to stamp one more out front, and then we'll stamp the last one in between these two but behind them. So we'll put him there. That looks good. And then we will need that mask down here. So we can stamp one more in between those last two, and it will appear to be behind them. And that one I want to be this big chubby jar. So it kind of looks a hot mess right now because everything's kind of all stamped over top of each other. But once we take the masks off, you'll be able to see how everything really looks. Need to carefully pull up our masks. So this is what we have now. So we have our scene with our 5 jars there, some out in front, some behind. I think it gives it a lot of interest to have some just in different placement, not all straight across. So we are going to color these with some Copic markers, and then hopefully our background will be dry. The first thing we'll do is color in our jar lids. So first I'm just laying down my base color, which is a light gray. I'm using C3. Next I'm going to come in with the C5 and add in a little bit darker colors where some of our shadows would be. And these stamps are really nice because they actually have some guidance here about where the darker colors and the shadows go with these lines that are there. And I try to kind of do almost in a semicircular pattern here to go along with the lines of the image. Then I'll come in with the C7, which is a little darker, and just do a very little bit of that. And anywhere where something is overlapping it, we will get a little bit darker, more of a shadow. So I will come in with our mid-tone, which is the C5, and kind of just make a line, you know, around the images that are overlapping it to give it a little bit more of a shadow there. And then back in with the C3 just to blend it out. And that kind of gives us the illusion that the lighter part in the center is coming out towards us. So it gives us, it helps us see more in 3D rather than just a flat image. So we're coloring the spoon next, and I'm using the warm gray markers because I wanted a different gray color than what I used for the jar lids, so it would stand out a little bit more. I didn't want it to blend in just to the background of those jar lids. Next, I'm moving on and coloring the cover on this jar and the other parts of the other jars. And you can see that flock there in the corner. Originally, I was going to make my background a flock, so I was trying to color to match that, but I didn't end up using the flock on this card. I used a different background instead, but I still ended up liking the color scheme that I ended up with here. So here I'm coloring that jar that's way in the back, so I'm using a darker color here because it would look a little bit darker having shadows on it from those jars in front. And here I'm trying to come up with a good color for like a grape jelly or something like that. And I didn't have a kind of a mid-tone color. I had a darker and a lighter color. So you can kind of make a mid-tone color by touching the tip of the lightest color onto the darkest color, and then it helps you blend those a little bit easier. So that's what I did here for that purple color. And here I'm doing kind of an all-over base color in the light and then coming in with the dark for the shadows and blending them together. Now, I don't know what happened, but I lost the rest of the footage of me coloring the rest of this scene, so I just wanted to talk a little bit and let you know how I finished up coloring here. I wanted to ground my image and have it kind of sitting on something, so I made some shadows below it using some of the lightest cool gray markers. I used 3 different shades here. I think it was the C0, C1, and C3, and just put some shadows right under the jars and blended that out. I think it just gives it a nice finishing touch there. So on to our background now. And I had mentioned that I originally was going to use the flock for the background, but I changed my mind and I wanted to do some ink blending instead. So I'm using 4 different colors of the Brutus Monroe surface inks, as well as the Tailored Expressions blending brushes to make my background. The colors of inks that I used, and I went from the bottom of the card up to the top, are Hayride, Apricot, Honeysuckle, and Rouge. And I just tried to blend them in at each different color change to blend those colors together a little bit. And I think it really ended up matching the coloring from the scene really well. I really do love these brushes. I think they make it so easy to get a nice seamless blend. and nice soft colors on your card without any harsh edges. And I love that they're so pretty with all the different colors. And I did spray some pixie spray onto the back of this stencil before putting it onto my cardstock. And pixie spray is a really nice temporary adhesive that allows you to keep your stencil onto your cardstock without it moving around. And it really helps you get nice crisp edges on your stencil because your inks and pastes and whatever you're using won't bleed under your stencil because all of those edges are nicely adhered down onto your cardstock. And it's really easy to remove from your cardstock. It won't rip it or leave residue. It's just really great that way. And I just use a baby wipe to wipe off the stencil front and back, and it still leaves some of that pixie spray on there for the next time you use the stencil. You will eventually have to reapply it, but I think I usually can get 2 or 3 uses out of the pixie spray before I have to reapply it. I just think this Jagged Heart stencil is really cute, and I think it really goes well with the Jars of Love stamp set. So after I have all the ink on there, I'm just wiping the stencil off with a paper towel, and then I'm going to put some of the Fallen Snow glitter glaze on top. So we're leaving the stencil in place for this because I want it to go just right over that area where we put all the ink down. And this glitter glaze has a kind of a clear base to it. So once it dries, you'll just see glitter over top of those colors, and the natural colors will shine through that we had there. I really love using these glitter glazes. I think they're really awesome and they give a lot of sparkle to your projects. So here it is still wet, so it looks kind of hazy, but once it dries, we get those colors coming through. And it's dry here, so you can see the inks that we had ink blended earlier are coming through. And it's just shiny and sparkly. So the next thing here, I didn't have a color cardstock that I thought matched my scene really well. So I cut out the sheet that I wanted to mount my scene onto. And here I'm just using some of the inks to ink blend onto that so I have a color to match the coloring I did. And this will be a matte for our scene. And I'm not going all the way, the entire piece of this cardstock because you'll only see the edges of it. So here I used the apricot and the rouge together to get that nice pink, kind of toned down pink color. Now for the sentiment, I knew I wanted some type of label to go on this card because I wanted to bring in the labels that are on the jars and kind of make a cohesive theme there. So I went searching through my Brutus Monroe inspiration boxes and I found these craft labels in one of them. And I think it was the box that was all about the mailboxes and the mail art. So I pulled these out, but it wasn't quite the right color. So I just took a couple of the surface inks and direct to paper just put some color down on there to help it match the rest of my card a little bit better. And once the glitter glaze was completely dry, I did come in again with the blending brushes and 2 of the surface inks, the rouge and the apricot, and just blend it onto the edges of the card just to give the edges a little bit of definition. Now I wanted to make this a thank you card, so I'm using that Tree of Thanks stamp set and one of the sentiments from it. And the sentiment says thanks a lot, but I just wanted the thanks part. So I'm taking a Post-it here and covering up the part of the stamp that I don't want to ink up. Then I ink it up, take the Post-it off, and then stamp it down onto my tag here. As you can see up in the corner, I had done this previously, but when I did the second impression, I got a blurry image because I think my tag moved. So I'm just doing this again, and I want to restamp it just to get a little bit darker of an image. And always make sure you take that Post-it note off, because I have forgotten to before, and then you just stamp a big blob of black onto your project. Not what we're going for. So once I have that done, you can see on the stamp set here, it's that one down in the left corner that says thanks a lot, but we just used the thanks part. So now we just have to put everything together. So I'm going to use some liquid glue just to attach the little tag here to my jar scene. And then I'll be using some of the black foam tape to put this panel, or this piece of the card, onto the panel. I really like this Brutus Monroe black foam tape. This is the thinner one, the lower profile one, and I think it gives a really nice dimension to the card without being too popped up. And I really like this one. The liner comes off of it super easily, so it's really easy to use too. And as I was going through my inspiration boxes looking for the tag, I came across these flat back pearls. So I picked two that I think matched, put them on either side of the sentiment, and that finishes up our card. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. See you next time.